And welcome back. Pull up a chair. Gather around this table here. We are once again around the redraft table. I'm joined again by my favorite co host, Grant. Grant, it's been a couple weeks, but we are back at it. We are once again talking redraft fantasy football, and it's fun to do so.
Yeah, for sure. It's took a couple weeks off, which is nice to get a break, but also a lot of football news has happened since the last time we talked, and want to kind of hit some highlights and kind of address some of the big news and injury updates from across the league last few weeks.
Yeah, so I mean, it feels like it's been a long time since we were talking about in August. It's draft time. We're
hmm
getting prepared. That feels like it was about 2 years ago at this point. So, but what's
hmm
kind of there's a lot's happened, but at the same time, not a lot's happened. And what's kind of your overall thoughts, whether it's this past week from week 5 or this first quarter of the NFL season? What's something that sticks out to you, or maybe a couple things that stick out to you as you look back on this first quarter of the season?
Yeah, I think for me, what am the most surprised about is just the lack of value in both quarterback and tight end positions relative to draft. I think that we knew the QB class was going to be deep. That's what we thought.
Yep.
Preseason, we're like, hey, there's 10 to 14 functional quarterbacks for a league. Probably can go off of waivers. That's great. But what we're seeing is we're seeing a lot of quarterbacks that are good, but not posting elite numbers. Now, obviously, there's
Right.
a few at the top there for sure, but there's a bigger band in the middle of like these 20 pointers, and that includes honestly like Patrick Mahomes, Brock Purdy, those quarterbacks that in the past might have done better. People consider Purdy like the game manager. Well, Mahomes, who in 2018-19 was this elite top quarterback, now is kind of putting up good yardage numbers, but he's not getting the production in the end zone quite that we thought. And so that's something I'm surprised about. The other thing also is tight end position. I think that going into the season, there were 5 or 6 tight ends that we thought were going to be really good, and the rest were kind of in the middle. And it is pretty much a barren landscape, and it's a dart throw pretty much each week based upon who is going to score tight end points. It's not good.
Yeah, if you score a touchdown as a tight end, you're pretty much a top 10 play for the week. So that's
Yeah.
kind of how it is. Do you think the lack of production has to do with, from an NFL perspective, an offensive lack of scoring in general? So that kind of correlates both those positions. Where I agree with you. I think
Mhm.
the lower outputs at quarterback that I think as fantasy gamers we want to see the high outputs, the high plays, the big shootouts, but we're kind of getting these low scoring games where it's a lot more defense, balanced offense. It's not really just shootouts anymore, as we saw 2020, 2021, all of that stuff. So you think it's because of that? That's kind of the correlating factor is offensively, there's just not as many points being scored.
Yeah, I think so. I think that the overall lack of production, I think just I don't know honestly. I look at stats like from a league perspective, but
Mm-hmm.
I'm also wondering if head coaches aren't just scheming tight ends as much. If they're just too valuable as a passing blocking asset. Look at Mark Andrews for example with
Yep.
Baltimore. I mean, if you tell me right 2 years ago, oh Ravens score the Ravens Bengals game goes 41-38, right? How many fantasy points did Mark Andrews score? You're going
Right. He
like,
has like,
oh, it's got to be 20, 25,
yeah,
30,
yeah, he's
right? And
breaking it.
in 1 point, yeah, in 1 point PPR leagues, he scored 9.5 points, right? So to me, that kind of, I don't know. I think overall, I've just seen coaches scheme less for tight ends. You're seeing less like routes in general. Routes are down for tight ends. The metrics in general are just low. So I wonder if coaches are realizing like, hey, out of our receiver sets, we like what we see. We like having more control. We like having more bodies, being able to block or just have, be available for a read option. I don't know. But overall, like tight end production is way down. And end of the season, I'm sure I'll probably try to dig up an article or two talking about why and like some metrics and just, looking at stats of snaps and everything given to tight ends.
Yeah, it's. I mean, the healthiest guys, whether took Travis Kelsey till this past week to kind of get unlocked. But again, that's a unique situation where pretty much all the wide receivers have gone down in Kansas City. You have Worthy,
Mm.
who's a rookie, and then the zombie corpse of Juju Smith Schuster resurgent, coming back again. But after that, it's like a barren
Mm-hmm.
wasteland there. So that's kind of the one of the caveats is it took all of that for Travis Kelsey to start making his appearance again.
Yep.
Tucker Craft off the waiver wire darling this past week. So if you started him, you feel really great. 2 touchdowns and feels fantastic to just stream him the rest of the way. But yeah, I agree with you. Like passing tight ends, I think specifically are having a lot harder time. So like you mentioned Mark Andrews, but I'll say Kyle Pitts is another one where
Mm-hmm.
it was he's away from the Arthur Smith offense. He's away from all this. He's going to be able to get the targets. He's going to run the routes. He's going to be that pass catcher we want him to be, and yet he hasn't produced.
Yep.
Even in the best matchup against Kansas City, who they are just a sieve to the tight end position, but he's not producing. So I think
Mm-hmm.
you're right. Where it's the passing tight ends, the pass catching tight ends, are pretty much up and down, and they're not really
Mm-hmm.
giving you that high output. And you've watching tonight we have the 49ers playing, but George Kittle is, I think, a perfect example of a balanced tight end who is a fantastic pass catcher, but is also a great blocker, where he will have weeks where he will disappear, but he's going to have weeks where he is just there. And I
Mm-hmm.
mean, it's the tight end position has turned into what is George Kittle able to do, because that's what everybody else is going to be able to do too. I don't know, my
Yeah.
opinion on that.
Yeah, for sure. And I think offenses too are, I think with tight ends in general, there are plays to get them open and utilize them right in general. But I think that you're seeing less schemes. I think that to me, it just seems like there's less plays designed for tight end usage. It's more of like, hey, it's a third, fourth option check down.
Yeah,
There's less, I don't know. You're just seeing a lot less production, right, across the board, and especially in. And again, I think I'd like to see some numbers in the year. I'll dig up some article, I'm sure somewhere.
sure.
But yeah, it just seems like to me like people are preferring just have those bodies in the box to help pass block,
Mm-hmm.
or honestly even to run block on a read option. It just seems like there's more bodies in the box and there's less tight ends going out for routes.
Yeah, I think if nothing else, I mean, we can kind of transition the conversation, but if nothing else, I would agree that it lowers the value of the position, to where if you're
Mm-hmm.
trading for a tight end, it's not this is a top 10 tight end that might be worth a wide receiver too, but at
Yeah.
that, that's probably on the high end of what you're going to get, because the position's so volatile, it's so depressed with its production that you're better off just if the guy started, if I have Mark Andrews, well, I can wait and hold, but I may as well stream and just see what happens, and I'm
Mhm.
okay with that, because that's just what it is.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And do you think that a lot of leagues going forward, because of the way tight end is, do you think there are leagues that do away with tight ends? I mean, because you're getting to the point where it's almost getting to be like a defense position, right?
right.
Where it's like almost like, oh, I have to start a tight end. Oh, I have to draft one. The value isn't there. I mean, the average, I need to look again at the average tight end value, but it's like 4, 5, 6 points a game, right? Is what the position's averaging, which is, pretty much what a receiver 4 or 5 would be in most 10-man leagues. So at that point, like, and are we going to see in league formats, you think, less tight ends in general and more like additional flex? Like, how do you think that if this trend happens for a couple more years with tight ends being low, do you think people are just like, hey, it's tight end, it's a position, we've had this in fantasy for 25 years, we're keeping it, or do you see some leagues try to go to like a double flex or another receiver?
So I think you're gonna have those purists out there that say that we want to mimic the NFL as much as we can, even though I don't personally agree with that. Because this is fantasy football. It's a game that's built on a game. It is not NFL football. So I think you're going to have those purists that say we have to keep the tight end position. But I do agree, either they do away with it, and I'd be a proponent of that in all leagues, just do it tight end position, or you change it to just a flex where it's just a flex position to where you give the league an option. Do you want to draft and start a tight end, or do you want to just forego that position? So while you're talking, I actually looked up. So on Fantasy Pros, rest of season projections. Okay. Again, this is a projection, but I think this goes to show kind of the dichotomy between a wide receiver position and um, tight end position. And this is standard scoring. So PPR, do with what you will. There may be a little influx, but the number one tight end projected the rest of the season is Brock Bowers. Okay. His fantasy points projection is at 110 points. Again, this is standard scoring. So PPR would be raised up just a little bit. To get to that, you have to go down to Deontay Johnson or George Pickens, and you're right in the middle, and that's at wide receiver 25, 26. So the tight end, we just said it, it's a wide receiver 2, but at that it's a low wide receiver 2, high wide receiver 3 for
Yeah.
value. You're always going to have that one guy who drafted Kelsey, 2021, when he went on an absolute
Yep.
tear, and he was the tight end one by a landslide, and say, well, it could happen. And yeah, sure, it
Yeah.
could happen.
Yeah.
But yeah, you don't make the rule based on the outlier season. So
Yeah.
yeah, I would say moving forward, it should just be done away with. Will that happen? Probably not, but I'd be in favor of just remove it or turn it into a flex
Mhm.
position.
Yeah, and also too, like I honestly wonder with flex positions, right? Like I need to look at some, but a lot of super flex leagues, right, or deep dynasty leagues, you have a lot of flex positions, right? So at what point does it become entirely flex positions? I don't know. There's obviously
Sure.
we got a rabbit hole with this, right? And
Yeah.
talk about the different rules that want to be changed, but yeah, I mean, it definitely. I think scoring trends are definitely could affect lineups and matchups for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, give it, it's kind of cyclical where scoring's down, it's been down for a few years. Watch it in the next couple of years start to turn, because all of a sudden defenses change a little bit how they're running it, because offenses are changing how they run it. We have, it was the Patrick Mahomes and that class, Josh Allen's taking all the deep shots and just blowing defenses out of the water, saying, "Oh yeah, you're gonna run single high. We're just gonna take 60-yard shots down the field every game." And so then
Hmm.
defenses said, "Let's go too high." And not a new concept, been around for a while. They just went back to it because teams stopped doing that for a while. So as soon as it stops, it'll start again. Um, but again, it just may be a bit. So, and then
Hmm.
that'll change. So yeah, I would say keep the tight end, but make it a flex so that if somebody says I need to draft a tight end, let them. And if somebody says I really don't want to, I'm not going to. So then they don't. So
Hmm.
put it back to your
Yep,
league.
I agree.
So well, I feel like we say this every year, and so it's kind of cliche. I feel like that injuries have kind of ravaged fantasy football, and not only fantasy football, but it's then that means real life football, because you have actual players, good players, not playing because
Hmm.
they're injured. So
Yep.
everything
Yep.
from injuries last season with like Nick Chubb, who's hopefully coming back, but then you have guys in the preseason that um, Chris McCaffrey, they've got an Achilles tear or strain, I should say, not tear, but Achilles strain. And so they're dealing with that. And I think you had said there's a news article that came out where he's potentially coming back November. So
Mhm.
a lot of injuries, though. And now we have bye weeks here that we want to, we got to navigate this. Sorry, I've got a
Yep.
moth up here on my desk. So if I feel distracted, I'm just trying to catch a moth. No worries.
You're good. You're good. Yeah. I think what you're saying is right. Is you've got um, a lot of injuries, and every year obviously it affects different people, and that's just football. It's a contact sport. It's a violent sport. People are going to get injured, but I think how with injuries, I think with fantasy football is, if you want to just ride your injuries, get someone off the waiver and plug in someone who probably isn't as good as your injured player, you can do that, right? That's the beauty of fantasy football. You can spend a little bit of time on this app. You can get in Sleeper, your ESPN app, Yahoo League,
Mm-hmm.
whatever it is, adjust your lineups for 5 minutes, look at some projected scores, plug and chug. If you start really diving into it, you could start looking at injuries, knowing who's injured, kind of what the status is for everybody, and start doing some trades. I'll use the example of Christian McCaffrey that we mentioned is consensus number one overall pick
Yep.
and has been out the whole year. So his value, as you get closer to a potential return, that player's value increases. So the person who has Christian McCaffrey is going to start looking for better and better deals. So now that there is a forecasted return, right? Because everything was up in the air. He went to Germany to see the Achilles guy that Kobe and KD saw. There was a bunch of like unknowns, what's going on, all these different things. Now you're seeing this early November timeframe. So now the time if you want to be savvy is to go in and start probing maybe the CMC owner and say, hey, I'm going to give you an extra guy that's done well, that's on my bench, right? That I might want to trade for you and see kind of what they buy, if they buy, if they need more. But this is kind of where you can kind of navigate and negotiate with people in your league to try to like get some injured players, McCaffrey, Nick Chubb, etc., to kind of help position your team for a playoff run.
So, I don't disagree with that. I think there's also like each one is a little different, and it kind of depends on. Of course, it depends on what's the value, right? Because Chris McCaffrey 101,
Mhm.
and you and I had said in the offseason, I understand the 101 of him, but especially as the injury came out and there's more information. It was I hesitate taking him because what if, and we're seeing that what if now, and of course hindsight's always 2020. We're always going to know more after the fact, but um,
Yep.
if you're the Christian McCaffrey owner and you've held on to him, he's been in your IR spot clogging up since the draft. What's kind of an offer you're looking at? Because realistically, if you're a McCaffrey team that, let's say you are 2-3, you got a slow start because your first round pick is not doing great, so you kind of hurting a little bit. You want to pick up some wins. It's kind of hard to say, well, I want first round value for him.
Yep.
While you drafted him there, that's kind of a sunk cost. What's kind of a value you would take? They would say that's a fair value, but I understand the risk coming back of, especially the Achilles, where what if it ruptures first play that he's back?
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Exactly. I mean, like I mentioned, you alluded to as well, is the value for Christian McCaffrey grows each week it's close to his return,
yep,
right? Because
yep.
that person has held him. It's another week of being on the IR or just overall not being available, right? So, I mean, I think right now with a early November return, something like a Josh Jacobs in that realm of kind of an RB2 range, I think is a fair value because what you're saying is like, hey, I'm punting my number one overall pick to you that could be a league winner, and I'm getting something in return that I think can win me 3 or 4 games. Because realistically, if you drafted him 101, and you did a snake draft, you'd come all the way back around and get either the 20th pick or your 24th, 23rd pick in a 12-man league.
Yep.
Then the issue becomes like your value for your team is dramatically lower than everybody else's, right? Because the number
Right.
one pick is so heavy. So yeah, that's where like you're looking at something like you're 1-4, you're 2-3. The panic button is a little real right now. Like you have to get some wins, or else you're going to be out of the playoffs. And yes, Christian McCaffrey is going to come back. He might win you the last 3 weeks of the season, but let's be honest. At this point, um, you're at a point where it's like, okay, early November. Most people that's week 9, week 10. Playoffs start week 13. Okay, you get 3 or 4 weeks of him left, but guess what? If you're like 2-9 or 3-6 or something like that, or whatever you are, it's not going to help you. It doesn't matter. So you have to let him go at some point.
Yeah, no, agreed. And now is the time where we're not too far into the season to say anybody's out of playoff contention, because you and I have both seen teams that start 1-4, 2-3, and make a big run the second 2/3 of the season and say, hey, this is now a playoff team. So it is about the moves you make. So I think what you're
Mm-hmm.
saying, and I would agree with it, is it depends on the price. um,
Yep.
you have to pay a little bit of risk.
Mm-hmm.
You have to give a starting running back, and I think that's a fair thing to say. Is give a starting running back that might be a running back 2, but potentially has some running back 1 upside. So you're talking, you threw out Josh Jacobs. I'd say probably in there. He's a little bit depressed by his value, but I think he's still there, like a James Conner.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe depending on the injury news with Aaron Jones, and especially on a bye week, you're able to maybe say, hey, he's been a really good running back. Maybe you're able to swing that. Um, is the value you think of Nick Chubb higher or lower than Christian McCaffrey at this point? I personally would say it's lower. Age a little
Yeah.
bit, and then that type of injury he had. I don't know what the ramp up time is going to be for him as well.
Yeah. I agree with you. I think the difference is with Christian McCaffrey is there's been a timetable on his return. Obviously, there's a lot of discussion around it because he is obviously an important part of the 49ers offense. So there's been a lot of discussion on Nick Chubb. Had one of the most gruesome knee injuries you could possibly happen,
Yeah,
both last year with the Browns and in Georgia when he was there playing college.
yeah,
So I think there's not really a timetable right now. Like he's been limited in practice last few days, taking some reps. We don't know to the extent, like we don't know how sharp that is. We don't probably know what kind of contact he's taken, right? So there's several factors where it's like definitely more of a risk. Doing a Chubb for Christian McCaffrey straight up is definitely a big risk. I would wait. Now I think it's a viable trade if Chubb comes back this week and does 10 rushes and
right,
does like 50 yards. It's his first game back. Then it's like, okay, we've seen him like actually play, and like, okay, we know he's going to start going forward. Like there's value there. But yeah, if you're going to give Christian McCaffrey at this point, you need someone who's going to bolster your team, and you're probably starting like a Bucky Irving or something, right? Like you're in
right,
this borderline fringe RB2 on a real football team position where you're in trouble. You need to have some stability at running back. You need to win some games, and yeah, I mean, of course, though, like if you're maybe even you're 500 or you're a little above 500 somehow, then sure, like you hold out and come November, McCaffrey pushes you over the edge and you're able to get to the playoffs.
yeah. And I mean that's a good call out of perhaps you're able to. Those are the types of moves that maybe you're trying to make now to give you that edge. It's all about that edge in November.
Yep.
So speaking of late backs or coming back and running backs, there is it time that are we going to see from Carolina Jonathan Brooks this year? Do you think they're at a point to say, let's this is our second round pick. We traded up to get him. We want him. We think it's great. Let's get him back, get him acclimated. or is this a hey, this is a lost season for us as an organization? Let's just wait. Let's not hurt our star running back, and let's just not push it this year. Um,
Yeah.
what
Well,
I think that's a more rational thing to do, but rational thinking doesn't always happen in NFL
yep.
front offices.
Yeah. I mean, I think they're either going to hold him out the whole year, get him healthy, or they're going to bring him back and split the backfield with this whole Miles Sanders, Chuba Hubbard thing where all the running backs get 5 to 10 carries a game, and then whoever has the hot hand maybe finishes the second half. I don't know. The thing is, I think 3 weeks ago, right when Bryce Young was still playing, I think for
Mm-hmm.
sure you say leave it, but Andy Dalton has given that offense a massive shot in the arm, and it's early enough in the season that I think that the Panthers can't write off the year just yet. I think that overall, their potential, I think, is high enough where, I mean, it's only 5 weeks into the season at this point. Like,
Yeah.
they can still do some damage in the division. It'd be really tough to say, like, hey, after 5 weeks, we've written this off. I mean, with the change in quarterback, like, a lot's happened, and they look a lot better.
No, I agree with that, and it's just more that question of talking about injuries and players coming back, and this is one where I'd like to see what happens because I have a few
Mm-hmm.
leagues that I'm holding Jonathan Brooks in hopes that he does come back, but I also look at how well Chuba Hubbard's been rushing the ball, and
Yeah.
it's legitimate. He's been a legitimate starting back where if you went zero RB for your draft and Chuba was in that range that you're drafting running backs, then you hit the nail on the head. You got it. You're set because he's been producing after Dalton started. So yeah, it's tough to know, but I think you're right. You
Mm-hmm.
hold. He's more of a hold to me. I'm not necessarily looking to trade for him, but I'm also not looking to trade away because
Yeah.
what if? There's that what if. So, uh, speaking of first rounds, let's talk through. Yeah, did you have something or
No, no, go ahead. That was
okay?
good. That was good.
Yeah, first rounds that players, and let's switch to wide receivers here, that kind of are disappointing. How concerned are
Mm.
we about some of these? And I want to kind of group these into their it's category of we saw wide receivers that had off-season issues because of contract disputes, because of whatever, not necessarily like legal or getting in trouble, but wasn't right with the team. So players like Jamar Chase, CeeDee Lamb, uh, Brandon Ayuk would be on that. Those types of players where you're drafting pretty high, first round or pretty high in your draft. Now Jamar Chase has had a couple blow up weeks now, but he took a little bit. How concerned are we on some of these? If you drafted some of those wide receivers, are we pretty concerned that hey, this isn't going to happen? Maybe you drafted CeeDee Lamb over Christian McCaffrey, and you're saying, "Wow, that I look stupid now. I may as well have drafted Malik Neighbors in the fourth round and just gone with
Yeah.
whatever I wanted to."
Yeah. No, I mean, I think the contract disputes were a real thing. I mean, again, it's only happened once, but again, receivers are pretty well known at this point to be divas with the NFL,
Sure.
probably more so than any other positional group. And so, I would probably say that Jamar Chase probably leads that group, followed by CeeDee Lamb, and both of those guys were aiming for new contracts. So it would not have surprised me in either case if they had held out. So I think avoiding them for your first round pick was not the worst decision. Obviously, looking back on it in hindsight, you're like, man, I took Tyreek third because I was afraid of CD and
Yeah.
Chase and all these guys. Like, okay, sure, like, but also too, it's one of those things of you can't do hindsight on them. You can't do hindsight on Tua being injured and Tyreek having Skylar Thompson. Skylar Thompson throwing Tyreek Hill. So to me, we talked about this earlier. It's never a bad thing to be safe, just because when you are in the first round in a competitive league, okay, all those receivers are high quality. If you picked like a Bijan, the all the preseason information pointed towards that being a safe pick at 3, right?
Yep.
Or maybe he was projected 6 or 7 or 8. And guess what's happened? Like the Falcons are using Tyler Algier along with him in the same way Arthur Smith is doing. And Bijan's being effective in the run, but they're only giving him the ball 10, 15 times a game. Like there's a lot of more head scratching involved with that. And so, I think that I think it is a lesson of like, you can, if you're aggressive, you can play on that and say, wow, Jamar Chase, like he hasn't practiced in like 2 months. Like, is he going to play and get a value pick if you're not scared of him? But
Right.
also can blow up in your face like Le'Veon Bell, and all of a sudden you have a top pick that can produce is doesn't play the whole year.
Yeah. I think one of the things that's being undervalued with Bijan is he's apparently been hurt the last couple of weeks. So I
Mm-hmm.
think that's part of the ramp up of Tyler Algier is they're taking a little bit of load off. Now, if he's fully healthy, I think you'll see a bounce back from him. But no, I do agree that we can't always look back and the Tyreeks that are not producing because of an injury to a quarterback. We can't know that that's going to happen, so we can't say, well, why did I pick him? I shouldn't have done that.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it was overstated a little bit, the situation in Minnesota that drove Justin Jefferson's value down versus like Chase, the CDs holding out, saying, well, it's better still to go with the talent. And while on paper in the offseason we say it's not as good of a situation, you still trust that it's a very competent situation. And if the talent is that good, then we're going to get production. I mean, look at, I mentioned his name earlier, but look at Malik Neighbors at the Giants, where that's a crazy, not great situation. And yet there's talent, he's got the opportunity, and he's actually doing something with it. So it can happen. I'm not going to say it will in every situation, but it can happen
Yeah,
if it's all right there.
and
So
yeah, and I agree with you. And that's the situation where in the preseason you're saying, okay, Giants aren't supposed to threaten the division this year.
right.
They've got Daniel Jones, a quarterback who has had a couple of good years, but overall has been very, mid. And you bring in a rookie receiver and new offensive scheme. All these things kind of ramp up and factor boom, 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 boom. And that narrative, I think, played into Neighbors falling as low as he did, which, of course, with that happening, then if you grabbed him in that round, like it's fantastic value. I mean,
Right.
it's gonna be a rookie, and I mean top 2 or 3 asset in a dynasty league. Honestly, at this point,
Yeah.
so yeah, I mean fantastic there. And but yes, I agree with you. Like it's one of those things where like sometimes you can overthink it and say, but like Marvin Harrison, same narrative, right? Like that was
Right.
it was Marvin Harrison and Neighbors were like 1A 1B with receivers from this draft class. And Marvin Harrison, like he's been good and he's, I think, done well for a rookie, but he hasn't been on Neighbors level in terms of production.
Right. And the interesting part is what drove the kind of separation during draft season was the situation drove Marvin Harrison up a bit because the
Yep.
talent was also there. But that drove Malik Neighbors down as far as the situation. So yeah.
Yep. Yep.
Well, as we kind of look at, let's take the AFC for example, and let's do a real quick just pulse check. And we can go team by team, but some teams we may have not as much of a situation that we're
Yeah.
looking at. But I think there's been some pretty interesting stories of, are there situations, players that were saying, hey, I'm really interested in this. I want to see how this looks. I'm kind of buying, or I'm kind of maybe not wanting to be a part of this as players on my fantasy team. So um, we can start with the AFC East. I think there's been a lot coming out of the East. I'll start at the bottom here, but the Patriots, Drake May is getting the start this week against the Texans. Ramondre Stevenson was said last week he was being benched, but with all the changes, is there anything you're saying typical 12-team league? Um, are we changing our opinions on anything with the Patriots? 'Cause I personally am not. I want to see how it looks.
Yeah, no, I think you kind of have to let the Patriots ride. I mean, I think you've so far nothing on that team has is reflected of me where at least sorry, nothing's indicative that it's going to change at all the situation, especially with now Drake May making his first start
Mm-hmm.
on Sunday, I believe is when they play. That's going to be we'll kind of see how that goes, right? That could be an indication of the team's success, right? Maybe the quarterback play can elevate there, but again, I don't know if that really changes. Give me a couple weeks, I think at least before we can make a decision on the Patriots and if
Yeah.
like their value goes up or down. Now, might be a good opportunity because of the change, right? A
Right.
quarterback change can warrant can right now we know what the Patriots are. If you try to buy or sell players, right, knowing that a change is going to happen, that could benefit you or harm you depending upon how the offense goes. But yeah, there's probably going to be some volatility the next couple of weeks of that offense for sure.
Yeah, I mean, Superflex leagues, this may be the opportunity to say I want to stash Drake May, but I think you're right where we saw it with some of the rookies already starting this year, Caleb Williams, Jaden
Yeah.
Daniels. Um, they need a few weeks to acclimate, so I don't think he's
Yeah.
a go out stash right now. Um, let's see what happens. But I think that's a Superflex league only where you're saying potentially, as far as Drake May specifically. So um, all right, the Dolphins.
Mm.
Tua might be coming back after the bye. Um, obviously, if you've had Dolphins, it's been very disappointing. Um, do we see this changing drastically when Tua comes back? Obviously, this is his fourth concussion in 3 years
Yeah.
or 4 years, however long. But that's pretty severe where he's again the more concussions you take, I'm not a doctor, but the more concussions you take, the more susceptible you are to them. So how concerned are we? Is it time to trade away your Dolphins player because hey, this is as high as it might be with the potential of hey, Tyreek still might be a top 10 with Tua coming back, or are we
Yeah.
saying I'm out?
Yeah, I mean, I think at this point, if you have Dolphins players, you're holding them at their lowest, right? So you
Yep.
probably are getting a decent amount. You're probably getting a decent amount of offers for Tyreek, saying, "Oh, I'll Romeo Dobbs for Tyreek or something." Who knows? You're throwing out some kind of crazy trade offer. So I think at this point you're looking you fielded I'm sure a few, but with Tua coming back on the horizon, you got to hold and hope for the best, right? Because the ceiling just grows exponentially when Tua comes back for Tyreek and the rest of that offense, just to have sustainable drives.
Yeah, I think if you can weather the storm, if you especially, I think this is a Tyreek specific, or it could be Jalen Waddle even too. But you wait for the one game that they blow up. Miami looks like they fix themselves once Tua gets back, and if you're still concerned, then you trade it away because, like you said, this is
Yeah,
their lowest
yeah.
points. But then you use that to say, see, they're back. It's fine. So now I'm offering this to your league mates, and it's a risk because what if they are fully back? But at the same time, I mean, the risk could be what if Tua gets concussed again and you're left holding Tyreek for the rest of the season. So,
Yeah, exactly.
the Jets. Well, they have no news coming out of London, right? They fired their head coach, so no news with the Jets. They're just a dumpster fire. So no news. No, head coach Robert Saleh is out. That was announced, yesterday, I believe. And they have elevated a new offensive play caller. So Nate Hackett is now not going to be the main play caller. I saw that article earlier today. Um, if they win on Monday night, let's be clear. If they win against Buffalo on Monday night, they will be in the lead of the AFC East. So
Mm.
they're not out of it yet. They're 2-3, but they're not out of it yet. Are we convinced that the coaching shift up is going to be what changes it, or is this We have seen Aaron Rodgers' best, and it's coming up short.
Yeah, I mean, I think that we're just not going to see. I think between the Achilles and him being older, I mean, I think he's a good quarterback for sure, but I just think
Sure.
that overall, we're not going to see MVP level caliber play from him this year with the Jets. I don't think it changes with Robert Saleh being out. I don't think taking the offensive coordinator and making him a head coach is going to change anything. If anything, it's going to make it worse because he has now head coaching responsibilities in addition to calling the plays. So I don't think it really helps anything. The concern I really have on the Jets is Brees Hall
Oh,
because
yeah.
he has been really underutilized, and I think everyone drafted him as a top two running back. I mean, the consensus was pretty much Bijan then him
Right.
in the first round, and start off the year with three great games. The last couple weeks against now decent defenses for sure, but he hasn't
Yep.
done much. So that's fantasy wise, that's who I'm concerned about. And if I'm a Brees owner, I'm very concerned because they don't have a lot of easy teams coming up, and those teams are going to challenge them, especially running the ball.
Well, I think they have coming out of their bye in week 12. So if you're a Brees Hall, like this is the opportunity to trade for Brees Hall, I think. Because, yeah, they've had a pretty brutal, I would say, start of
Mm-hmm.
the season with against defenses. So facing San Francisco, it's not an easy defense. I know San Francisco has had its flaws, but it's not easy defense. Tennessee's a good defense. New England, I mean, it's a divisional game, so it is what it is. That's probably the easiest matchup that they have. But then Denver and Minnesota, those are both defenses that we want no part of as far as fantasy players playing against those defenses. So coming up, Buffalo should be a pretty decent matchup. Pittsburgh's not going to be, but then they got New England again. So I think it gets easier, but I definitely agree with you that the two main players I think they have to keep going or get started is they have to keep Garrett Wilson going. Now, whether he has 22 targets every game, I don't know, but you have to keep his production level up. And then Brees Hall, you got to get him going and not worry about, let's get Braylon Allen in there. Now, I will say Braylon Allen could be a problem. He's a very good rookie, very good running back, but I think the Jets have to focus on can we get Brees Hall and Garrett Wilson going and just let's go with that. So that'd be my take
Mm-hmm.
is that's what you have to look for with them. So
Yeah, and I think I saw like Garrett Wilson has one of the highest target shares of any receiver, right? So like he's getting looks, it's just not resulting in a lot of yards and
yeah,
fantasy value, which
right,
is which is the unfortunate thing.
right. So if they can get those two playmakers going, I think real football wise they have a chance, but then that's what you're happy fantasy wise as well. So
Yeah,
on the Bills, I don't have a whole lot. Kincaid is disappointed, and like all tight ends this year, he has really disappointed. Obviously, Allen's doing great. James Cook has shown the resurgence of the last half of last year, and then Shakir has been
mm-hmm.
the wide receiver that we always knew it we wanted out of Buffalo. Right? That's
Yeah,
how we drafted
yeah.
it. So, um, not a lot of news. We kind of touched on tight ends and kind of the struggles they've all had, and Kincaid just fits right into that. So I think if you have a Kincaid, you're probably holding him because there's not a better option, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree with you there. I think that the Bills, like, there's, they've had a couple tough games that have
Mm-hmm.
come down to the wire recently, and I mean, I think if you got Josh Allen, of course, you're holding on to him. His running game makes him very valuable. It looks like the concussion wasn't that big of a deal, or if it was, he's downplaying it. The medical staff
Right.
ignored it. I don't know. There's the NFL conspiracy lives on.
Yep.
But I think what you brought up is spot on for the Bills. Like no real major changes there. I mean, there's been no major developments at receiver that have warranted enough discussion to like you're like trading up or really change up your lineup to get one of them or to get Dalton Kincaid or anybody else.
Yeah, I think if anything, this is an opportunity to sell Shakir because you may be worried about how much the Bills want to lead on the run game, which I mean they have a winning record. So if they keep winning, why change it up? So switching over
Yeah,
to the
yeah.
South, I think we can kind of run through this a little bit quicker, but South start AFC, the Jaguars will start at the bottom here, and I think the Jaguars are a little bit in turmoil. High hopes for them this year, but fantasy wise, I think the only potential surprise, but it's been really good. Like what I love seeing is Brian Thomas Jr. Or no, it's not Brian
Mm-hmm.
Thomas Jr. That's running back, but Brian Thomas, the wide receiver, the
Yes.
rookie, he has been a bright spot for them. I will just say that. Lawrence may be disappointing, but I love seeing what that wide receiver is doing at Jacksonville.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think overall Jacksonville, like it's tough right now for them. Like you have Bigsby into
Yep.
Etienne's shares a little bit and looking better. Lawrence is hopefully you're not starting Lawrence in a redraft single QB league. So yeah, it's Jacksonville's is tough. It's a tough real football wise and fantasy wise is other than Christian Kirk maybe as a flex. It's tough to
Yeah.
find value there on your team for that.
So I've not heard this, and I had this thought the other day. Real football wise, if you're Jacksonville on the coaching staff, I didn't draft some of these players. I was specifically thinking about Travis Etienne. Do I trade him? Do I trade him to another
Mm-hmm.
team and say, let's,
Yeah, I
we
mean,
we picked up his 5th year option, but we're not going to go anywhere this year, and let's trade him. Let's see what we get.
yeah, I mean, it's not the worst thing. I mean, even the 49ers, right? Like somebody who needs a running back,
Dallas.
functional, healthy running back. Yeah, Dallas, 49ers for sure. I
Yeah.
mean, not the worst thing in the world.
Yeah, I don't know. I've not heard that anywhere. That's my own pure speculation of,
Mhm.
hey, what if why have this? Why have this controversy here? Let's trade him and let's move on. I don't know.
Yeah,
Uh
I agree.
yeah. Anyway, sorry. Real football talk. That's great. Tennessee. I don't have a whole lot other than the schedule gets easier. Will Levis has been very mistake prone, and that's kind of hampered the effect. I'm going to be looking at can DeAndre Hopkins come out of the bye and reclaim this wide receiver one, and did we get something clear out of the backfield? But other than that,
Mhm.
I'm not looking at a whole lot for Tennessee fantasy wise.
Yeah, is Mason Rudolph going to start? Do we know, or is Levis going to come back and start after the bye? Do we know?
I've not heard that Mason Rudolph is starting, but it honestly wouldn't surprise me.
Okay,
Before
I
the
wasn't sure
draft,
how
I
his
was
wrist
yeah.
is. I know.
Oh yeah, I don't know.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know because I know he came in and they got that win right when he got injured. I can't remember who they played. Maybe Jacksonville. I don't know, something like that. But
Might have been yeah.
Mason Rudolph came in and won him a game, and so I'm wondering if that's if after the bye week Levis is feeling good. Probably, most likely they're going to go with Levis, but maybe with Rudolph, who's had more experience in the NFL, maybe value of DeAndre Hopkins goes up a bit.
Yeah, maybe. There's not a lot with Tennessee to talk about at this point.
Yeah.
It's a can the quarterback start to actually be functional and not make so many horrible, awful, real mistakes for football.
Yeah.
So,
Exactly.
um, yeah, Indianapolis. The main thing is they've been plagued with injuries, but Flacco has come in for Anthony Richardson. Now Richardson looks healthy
Yeah.
again. If Richardson can't clean up and I have Richardson in some of my leagues, so I was buying into some of the hype. But if Richardson can't clean up some of his throws, then that I think that spells kind of issues where we could see more Flacco this year. And if we see
Yeah.
more Flacco, that definitely I think raises the value of Indianapolis wide receivers. But before that, they have to get healthy. Pittman is potentially missing this week. And then
Yeah.
Jonathan Taylor has an ankle injury. So they have to get healthy first, but that's kind of what I'm seeing. And if Flacco's there, I'll start Flacco. I think he's been fantastic. So
Yeah, yeah, and I agree with you. I think Michael Pittman, like, they're just injured. There's a lot of injuries there, and um, it's tough. It can be tough to trust Colt receiver unless you have no other option.
right, if Flacco's starting and Pittman's out, I like Josh Downs' value to rise. But at the same time, AD Mitchell would be interesting as the rookie as well. So they all get interesting, but it's not somebody I'm breaking the bank to
Mhm.
say I need him on my team. So
Yeah, exactly.
Texans. Biggest piece of news: Nico Collins is on IR with a hamstring for 4 weeks. So get a little clarity at the wide receiver room. Um, Joe Mixon may come back this week, maybe next week, but I think that provides clarity. And until
Yeah,
Nico Collins is off IR, it's start Diggs and Dell. So let's see if he ramps up here. That's kind of what I'm looking at with the Texans.
yeah. I think Tank Dell has taken a back seat so far this season,
Mm-hmm.
which has been surprising. We thought it'd be a probably 1A, 1B, and a 2 situation
Right.
with Diggs and Nico and Dell, with Dell posting receiver 2 numbers, and he really hasn't. So this will be an opportunity for him to take that and
Yeah.
see if he establishes his footing. And it could be where he does well enough where, who knows, maybe just the way the Texans are, they say, hey, we're trading one of these guys at some point. I don't know. I mean, probably not Nico, but like if there's production and a team wants them for a receiver 1 or 2, he could move. But I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah. I mean, this is also probably why the Texans went out and were saying, yeah, we'll take on Diggs because we know the value of what our wide receivers are, and if they get hurt, then we don't want to be without the ability to have that production. So, um,
Yeah.
yeah. Switching up to the north, the surprising 1-4 Bengals. Starting to see more offensive production from them as far as Higgins, Chase starting to come up. We kind of talked a little bit about contract disputes and slow upcoming for wide receivers. Is Chase Brown, speaking of chases, is Chase Brown finally starting to take over that backfield? Or is it still going to be split, you think?
Let's say he's carving out a little bit of a role, and I think too
Mm-hmm.
the Bengals are playing pretty free right now. They're 1-4. The pressure's off. I don't think the expectation is for them to honestly even get a wild card spot. So to me, I feel like that at this point in the game, Joe Burrow's going to air it out. I mean, it's going to feel like the Chargers, honestly, a couple years ago with Herbert, where it's just like, hey, we're slinging the ball around, scoring a ton of points, but we're still going
Yep.
to lose games. And I think that's just what the Bengals are going to do this year. So if you have Burrow or Chase, either Chases, I think you're in good shape, and you want to try to acquire those players if you have them, or if you don't
Yeah.
have them, or try to sell them if you can, I guess, at a high value. But yeah, Bengals offense looks fantasy wise great. I
And
just think that real football wise, maybe not so good in the defense side.
yeah, I mean, fantasy wise, they've been producing numbers the last few games. So now is the time if you're going to trade them away and say, hey, I want something big in return back for them. So, um, just
Mm-hmm.
especially like you said, but the pressure's off them now. 1-4, they have an
Yeah,
outside chance of making the playoffs. So what do they care at this point? The coaching staff is now playing, or they're coaching for their jobs at this point. I think so.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
Yeah, Browns also at 1-4. But this is a little one different 1-4 situation. I feel like where uh, as long as Deshaun Watson is the quarterback for the Browns, are we starting any Browns? Do we care?
I think you can probably say no, right? And maybe Amari
Yeah.
Cooper in deeper leagues if you're desperate. But
Or
no, I think that
yeah, no, I agree with that. But or do we trade for Amari Cooper now in hopes that we see Jameis Winston?
yeah, no, I mean that's a good idea because I mean Jameis knows how to throw the ball. It might not be the most accurate, but he's going to throw the ball well. Whereas Deshaun Watson looks like just some inefficient, quarterback
Yeah.
back there. So at least with Winston, he might throw for 450 and have 5 picks, but at least he's moving the ball around.
Well,
Yeah, I mean, I think not the worst decision.
30 for 30, 30 touchdowns, 30 interceptions, 30 for 30 right
You're
there.
right. Yep, you're right. You're right.
I don't know. That's all I'm saying. I think Deshaun Watson is gonna quickly. I say quickly. Ownership. We've talked about the Browns' problems before a little bit, and so we don't have to necessarily hash into that a lot. But the Browns' problems is Deshaun Watson is going to be the highest paid backup quarterback, and I don't think we're seeing that because ownership has spent this much money on him, saying he has to be our starting quarterback, and it's just not working out.
No,
I don't know.
no,
Everybody sees it. It's not working out.
no, it's not.
Okay. A little more interesting. I want to kind of dive into a little bit of this, but Pittsburgh Steelers, they are tied for the division lead at 3-2. Um, do we have a Justin Fields problem in your opinion? And if so, do we see a change to Russell Wilson?
I mean, I think Justin Fields has been good. He's
Yeah.
been efficient and hasn't turned the ball over, which is what the Steelers want. At this point, if Wilson comes back and is healthy, is he going to think of the Broncos last few years? I
Yep.
mean, we've seen that. We've seen what he's been able to do. Is that going to be better or worse than what Fields is doing right now? I don't know how much better it could be, honestly. You know,
Yeah.
so that's where I'm wondering is like fantasy wise, like that it will probably change like Pickens and other receivers, but
Right.
from like what Mike Tomlin's thinking, like I don't know how much I don't know what he's thinking is going to elevate the team that much. So I think Fields is actually going to like. I mean, I'm sure there's conversations happening, right? But I think he's going to stay for a while. I would think.
I would think so too. I asked the question because I've heard rumors around, is there a Fields problem? I don't think there's a Fields problem. I agree with you. I think Fields gives them the best opportunity to make plays and to go win. If they switch to Russ, he is a master at this stage in his career of dinking and dunking. He'll give you 2 yard passes down the field. I think more the issue is actually that the Steelers have a George Pickens issue. And by that,
Mm,
if you watch the game Sunday night, I didn't watch a lot of that game because it was very late. But seeing some of the replays, there's a George Pickens issue of there's something going on there that has to be resolved, and I think the team gets better once that is resolved more than
mm,
anything else. So I agree. I don't think the answer is change Fields for Russ. I think it's figure out what the heck is going on in between the ears of Pickens, and that will your team will get elevated then. But my
yeah, I
opinion.
agree.
Ravens. Other than are we dropping Mark Andrews, I think we know who we're starting. We're starting Zay Flowers. We're starting Derrick Henry, who looks like the Derrick Henry of old. Starting Lamar Jackson, and maybe picking up on a very, very deep league, Rashad Bateman, and you're streaming Isaiah Likely. But I mean, other than
No,
are we dropping Mark Andrews or not, I don't think there's a whole lot out of this team.
no, I think too. Like honestly, you're kind of avoiding both at this point. Like if you have Mark Andrews, you're hold on to him because of sunk draft value, right? But that's pretty much it. I think likely is streamable if you're desperate, but super inconsistent. And I don't know if that's something that realistically can be depended upon. Like I think I think there should be better streaming options for tight end and likely, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree, and I don't disagree that. Yeah, you're probably holding Andrews because of draft capital, and at this point, you probably, unless you've picked up another streamer, you probably don't have a better option. I
Mm,
think his lack of production has to do with two factors. One, the emergence of Zay Flowers, and now he is the number one target in that offense. But then two, adding Derrick Henry, they have a run game that they haven't had in the past that just it can be dominant.
mm,
So
yep.
they don't need to lean on Andrews anymore. So
No, I don't.
yeah. Okay. Raiders. Um they're apparently making Aiden O'Connell quarterback, so we're not gonna see the Minshew stash anymore. This year that's kind of sad. Devontae Adams wants to trade. He wants out of there. That's not surprising. Anyway, he gets to the Chiefs, or is he going somewhere else?
No, I don't think he's going to go to the Chiefs. It's going to be, probably the Jets or the Saints or another team that I don't think they give him to the Chiefs. I think there's a rivalry there, and they wouldn't let him go. And
Right.
on top of that, I don't think the Chiefs would be willing to dump that much draft capital into him, considering what they've been able to do with getting
Yeah.
basically these free agent receivers to come back and give him 100 yards.
No, I agree. I asked that just because it's thrown out there, and I agree. There's real football wise, there's no way the Raiders are saying, "Oh yeah, division rival, you can have our best wide receiver. Don't worry, we don't care."
Mm-hmm.
They wouldn't ever hear the
Yep.
end of that. Are we dropping Zamir White? We kind of looked at him
Yeah, that's a
draft
good
season.
question.
What? Yeah, that was a draft season. Question of like he's gonna get the volume, but now we have kind of a problem. So now I think that's the biggest question: of are we dropping Zamir White?
Yeah, I think with how Madison's playing, I mean, Madison's probably fitting into your zero RB build. I think White is droppable, especially if you've had him on your bench for a few weeks.
Right.
You can pick up someone else. Like, I don't really see him taking over that backfield anytime soon. It's not a great backfield to be a part of, but I think Madison's the back to have.
Yeah. No, I would agree with that. It kind of looks ugly, but White has looked like a lesser version of Madison, in my opinion. And so,
Mm-hmm.
because Madison's getting the goal line work, I agree. You make that switch. It's kind of sad, but these are the moves you got to make and be willing to say, "Hey, I might have been wrong." So we'll go with that. But
Yeah. Yep.
uh, Chargers coming out of the bye. There's not a whole lot. I think Lab McConkey is starting his surgence of wide receiver one for them. Uh, I think the only question is how long can J.K. Dobbins keep this up? Is he going to be able to last all season for their running back one?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean J.K. Dobbins is great and definitely quicker, even off his injuries than Eckler has been for them.
Yep.
So definitely faster. I just think the way that the Chargers play and the play calling, you can tell for the play calling for Herbert, you can tell is a little more conservative, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now that Harbaugh's taken control, we saw that kind of like an ugly game versus the Chiefs before they went on bye this last week. They played Denver, which is again not going to be a good game for Dobbins. I don't think it's
Yep.
going to be a really nasty, low scoring game in my opinion. And yeah, I mean the Chargers are kind of like the Steelers, honestly, a little bit, where
Yeah.
it's just like I think that they have a better quarterback situation for sure, but
Sure.
they're trying to win games that are like 17-10 or 13-10, something like that. Like they're not gonna. It's not like the Chargers of old that we had this all-star offensive staff that was able to put up 40 points to hang with their opponents. It's just not that's not how they're wired this year.
We kind of hit on that a little bit in draft season, though, where we kind of saw that's what they wanted to do. So I think you bring up some great points of we saw what the Chargers were. If you grab Dobbins late in your draft or you were able to pick him up on the free agent, you're enjoying the benefit of having a very late RB2 that
Mm-hmm.
you might be
Yep.
able to turn around. So, yeah, I think you
Yes.
hit all the good points. I agree with you on that. So, you touched on Denver, the opponent for the Chargers this year. Is Bo Nix starting to come to himself? Meaning, are we starting to see the Bo Nix that it's, you know, who we thought it was going to be? It hasn't looked pretty, but again, they played the Jets. That's not an easy team. They haven't had an easy road so far.
Yeah, I mean when they played lost. I mean they played the Raiders right last week, and he threw two
Yeah.
touchdowns, which is nice, and that was good. He's had three different 200 plus yard games, but
Mm-hmm.
also had a couple of not so good games. So to me, he's obviously a rookie, so he's still getting the hang of things. I think for a rookie, he's doing great. I don't think the problem with the offense is him in particular. I think it could be a combination of things. We saw similar struggles with the team with Russell Wilson last few years. So I think Bo Nix just though the ceiling's higher, of course, because he's still getting his offense figured out. So I mean, to me, I don't see any warning bells. I mean, he like was what 27 of 19 or something like that last week, which is I think fine. Like that's great for a quarterback,
Yeah.
and threw 2 touchdowns. So to me, like that's a safe. He's figuring things out. Vegas doesn't have not the best defense, right? But like they're not horrible. I think the Chargers will be a decent matchup with what they can give him, especially when they can rush him. And I think that's going to kind of decipher that will be a good indication, I think, to see how he's going to do is how well can he handle the Chargers at home, because they have a couple of like they've got New Orleans and Carolina, but then they
Hmm.
have Baltimore, Kansas City, which will be a tough stretch for them.
Yeah. No, definitely. So, kind of go on a tangent. Did you see the clip of Max Crosby just absolutely trolling Bo Nix right on the line of
Yes,
scrimmage?
yeah, I did say that. That was good. That was really fun.
I thought that was hilarious. I was like, wow, that's just, hey, Ricky, welcome to the NFL. They can't hear you. Call it louder. So I thought it was great. Yeah, I think if we're using Broncos on our fantasy teams, either it has to be a very deep league or your team is not doing so hot. So that's time to make a
Mm-hmm.
change. So
Yep.
I think we're kind of seeing that three-headed monster in the backfield where it's Javante Williams and Jaleel McLaughlin, which we thought, but it's also mixed in a third running back as well. So it's kind of muddled everything up. So any one of those I think is at best a flex play, but maybe running back two, depending on the week. So, and we saved the absolute best. And yes, I'll be a homer. We saved the absolute best, the Chiefs, for last. And going on by, obviously the season has gone exactly the way we thought it would because bringing in Hollywood Brown, still having Rashi Rice, having Isaiah Pitch. Oh, I'm sorry, hold on, they all got injured. So 5-0 though. Um, Somehow old man Chelsea and they're bringing the Rat Pack back where uh, Kareem Hunt's their leading rusher from last week. Juju Smith Schuster is the leading wide receiver, and Travis Kelsey goes bananas. Um, but they still have a good defense. I don't know. Are you buying into Juju or Kareem Hunt at this point? Are you saying, "Yep, let's go in on those"?
Man, that's really tough. I think it's just hard because it is one game,
Yep.
but it's really hard to. The Chiefs are tough. Like we've talked about this like almost every year with the Chiefs. Like
Right.
and really the three constants have been Mahomes, Kelsey, and Tyreek, right? And then when Tyreek left, it was just Kelsey, Mahomes, and everyone outside of that was pretty unstable. And then last year, Pacheco came on the scene as a reliable fantasy option, and this year you don't have that. And honestly, I mean, this is maybe the I don't know. I'm a Chiefs fan, of course, and but man, it's really hard to of the current available healthy players, right? That's a very strong caveat there to
Yeah.
that
Yep.
statement.
Yep. Yep.
I don't love starting any of them. I think Juju, if you are in a deep league and desperate, but for like receiver one, receiver two, I mean, you're probably not starting Juju, right? Because you probably have some depth.
Right. And I think he has to be at most considered a flex play
Yeah,
because we've hit on this. And yeah, I agree. It was before Rice got injured. What we saw was Rice was the number one target. He was leading that room. He was the one you wanted, and he was showing it. He was actually producing. After that, I think we get back to what we saw 2 years ago, and then even last year before Rice started taking control of the offense. Of you just don't know week by week who it's going to be. This last week it was Juju.
yep,
Next week it might be Justin Watson. It might be Xavier Worthy. I mean, I think we just don't
yep,
know, who. I don't think we know who's
yep.
going to be. So, yeah,
Well, and what
is
scares me a lot. Oh, sorry.
no,
Go
no,
ahead.
go for it. Yeah, you don't finish your thought.
No, I was gonna say with Juju, like he was around a 20-25% snap share before Rice
Yeah,
gets injured. Then he didn't during the Chargers game. Of course, he didn't catch anything. Right there, he was on the field about half the snaps, didn't catch anything, and of course had the big resurgence this game. So I think what's going to be telling is next week, right, when teams have a chance to plan for him and prepare as he's the one of the main receivers, and we'll see how
Mm-hmm.
that goes. I think it's going to be a telling sign because if he can still put up decent numbers, maybe a 5 receptions sort of, and what I'm aiming for here is like at least 6 or 7 targets, right? If he can
Yeah,
have that kind of floor, I think that it's a great flex play. But again, like the way that Mahomes is throwing the ball looks way different than he has the last few years, where he's throwing it for 400 yards a game, looking like Josh Allen is right now, right? It's a different look. So Mahomes might only throw for 220 yards. Well, is Juju going to get 130 again like he did last week? Like, probably not. So
right.
it's one of those things where you're looking for this, 5 out of 7 targets to receptions for, 85 yards kind of thing. That might be what we're expecting out of Juju as a flex spot.
Yeah, no, I agree, and I don't think you can trust them because coming out of the bye, they get San Francisco, which that's not going to be an easy matchup. I know San Francisco's kind of been up and down, but again, I don't think it's an easy matchup with them. So yeah, we'll definitely see. But I
Mm-hmm.
think temper expectations. Juju's the hot name now, but I think it's a very much reactionary piece to what we saw on Monday
Yeah,
night. So very
yeah,
easy
for
to
sure.
do. But um, is Mahomes still a QB1 or is he now a QB2?
I think QB2. I
Yeah,
think that he's again. I think the name he's the most popular player in the NFL, so I think that obviously carries a lot of weight. But I mean, he's the big problem I'm having with him is he's throwing picks every game, right?
yeah,
And the Chiefs are still winning, but like overall, I mean, he's not as efficient. He's not producing as much. The Chiefs are relying more on their defense and their run game, which hasn't been the case in 18, 19, 20. The last couple of years they've done that more, which we saw and discussed a lot last year. But they're really doubling down on their defense and running game doing well, and Mahomes is just making trying to make good decisions and delegating the ball to playmakers at key times and not trying to force the play. Now, every once he has to have 1 or 2 like really stupid passes that just happens, and they're head scratchers. But
yeah.
I think overall, yeah, he's delegating the ball more, and you're not seeing him try to throw for 400 yards a game.
Yeah, I think that's not going to be realistic. So yeah, if you're able to trade him for QB1 value because of the name, I say go for it. But I agree. I think
Mm-hmm.
realistically, fantasy wise, this is again the importance of fantasy versus real life quarterback. Real life, I'm taking
Yeah,
Mahomes every time. Doesn't matter. Fantasy wise, he's a QB2, and we're just gonna move on. So yeah. Well, Grant, it's a lot of fun. A lot of
yeah.
reaction. A lot of reaction.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Anything you're looking forward to with week 6?
Oh man, week 6. What I'm interested in seeing is Jordan Love again. Can he's come back from his he had the Minnesota game, of course, that he came back and did well. And in the Rams, it was more moderate, right? So can he rebound and post QB1 numbers like we drafted him at, right? Can he put that numbers up?
Right.
My other thing is other which we talked about a little bit is Bijan Robinson playing at Carolina, has a hamstring injury. Like Carolina's defense is not good. So what does that look like for the Falcons? Can they take? They scored a ton of points in their win versus the Bucks last Thursday.
Mm-hmm.
So can they take that same energy and apply it to the Panthers or not? So those are just kind of 2 different players that I'm looking at where I'm saying, okay, I want to see how they rebound. Bijan, especially, we drafted him as a first round pick. He has been producing that, and can he carve out some more share from Algier, or is he going to be stuck in a running back by committee?
Yeah. No, I like that. And I think I'm looking to see specifically with the Jets. What do the coaching changes look like? How does the team look different, or do they? And then
Mm-hmm.
looking at some of the rookie quarterbacks, Jaden Daniels, Caleb Williams, they're kind of starting to come on their own. Daniels gets Baltimore this week, so that's not going to be an easy matchup. So is he going to take that next step and against a formidable team be able to produce what we've been seeing? And does Caleb keep taking that step forward? He had a better matchup last week. He took advantage of it, passed for over 300 yards, a couple touchdowns. Again, has a very favorable matchup with Jags this week. So is he able to keep that
Mm-hmm.
going and start building on that we start seeing a resurgence the rest of the year? So that's kind of a couple of things I'm looking for this coming. And
Nice.
yeah, obviously hoping that injuries continue to go down. We don't get as many, but yeah, we'll see. So, well,
Yep. Yeah, I agree.
yeah, been a lot of fun and exciting week
Yeah.
6 coming up. So, yeah,
Yeah, we finally kind of talk about some more reactions and then go through some of the NFC teams and some players that we're looking at and
yeah,
reacting to as well.
yeah, definitely a lot to get to on the NFC side too. So we'll get to all that coming up hopefully next week. But till then, hopefully great week 6, and hopefully your fantasy team is does as well as you hope they do this week.